Touareg among the large crossovers produced since the early 2000s, perhaps the most affordable. For 400 to 500,000 you can buy a car at the age of 12 to 15 years and feel like a very successful person. Still, even a used Touareg is a status. At the start of production, he received only 3 engines, a 3.2-liter VR6 gasoline, a 4.2-liter V8 gasoline and a 5.0-liter V10 diesel. VR6 was installed until 2006, has a distributed injection and 2 power options, 220 horsepower, until 2005, then 241 horses. Cast iron block, good mileage, it can live up to 300,000 kilometers or even more. It's worth worrying about the tightness of all seals, it leaks from everywhere over time, and replacing the timing drive. Its chain runs more than 100,000, but is located on the back of the motor. The Diesel 10 was also transformed in terms of power. In 2007, 350 horses were removed from it instead of 313. Its block is aluminum, with a camber of 90 degrees, 1 shaft in each head, a pair of valves per cylinder and 2 VGT. One of the main problems is pump injectors, which easily break down when refueling with substandard fuel and cost about 40,000 rubles each. The cylinder diameter and piston stroke of the V10 is exactly the same as the 2.5-liter turbo diesel 5 obtained from this unit, which appeared back in the late 80s. R5 also willingly suffers from pump injectors. There are other common characteristic flaws. Let's say, fast, after 100,000 kilometers, where are the camshaft cams? Specifically, on the 5 up to 100,000, it happened that pumps failed. And in general, this base 174 horsepower diesel engine, which existed on the Touareg until the end of the first generation, is not the best choice. The crossover is too heavy for it. Another thing is the 225-240 horsepower 3.0-liter V6, which debuted in 2004. The diesel is definitely not the worst among those that have appeared over the past 15 years, especially if you compare its common rail with our 5/V10 unit injectors, and it digests our diesel fuel better. Do not take it as advice to refuel with any muck, and its pump costs only like a couple of parts of previous engines. But it has its own nuances. For example, a burnt EGR cooler, due to which antifreeze gets into the intake or into the oil, or broken plastic swirl flap gears, causing the motor to stop developing power. V8 4.2L with a capacity of 306 horses, like the VR6 3.2, had a distributed injection and 4 valves per cylinder. Since 2006, it has been replaced by a V8 4.2 with direct injection, 5 valves, and a power of 350 horsepower. The old V8 with the timing belt drive is unpretentious by German and VAG standards. The new V8 FSI was borrowed from the Audi Q7, which, in turn, got derated with 420 horses from the RS4. There were times when nozzles were poured from him, but in general, direct injection components can be considered quite reliable. In the same 2006, instead of the VR6 3.2, the Touareg was equipped with the VR6 3.6. Having direct injection, the engine develops 280 horsepower, and if we make allowances just for the fuel supply system, then everything that is characteristic of its predecessor is also relevant for this engine. In general, relatively good. Transmission. The Touareg's manual transmission is reliable, but extremely rare. Automatic is a 6-speed TR60 SN gearbox designed by Aisin specifically for the VW Touareg/Porsche Cayenne/Audi Q7 models. It is not known why the transmission order was given to the Japanese. For many other models, VAG cooperates with the German company ZF, but they did an excellent job for their time. And the speed at the level, and the invisibility of switching, implemented in Aisin and early blocking of the torque converter. As you understand, it is she who is one of the reasons for the rapid contamination of ATF, wear of the valve plate and, in the end, burnt clutches. In addition to it, an aggressive driving style and the owner's faith in the manufacturer's promises about the irremovability of oil. For the sake of increasing the service life, it is better to ride, especially on powerful motors. By the way, the TR60 SN was installed with all engines, in the half pedal. And it is desirable to change the fluid after 30 to 40,000 kilometers, well, or according to the state. In this case, you can count on a mileage before a repair of 100,000 or more. However, until 2006, valve bodies had inherent flaws, which manifested themselves up to 100,000 and, presumably, have long been eliminated. Now anyone can be restored with the help of separately offered solenoids. A jammed thermostat and a pump or its sleeve in early modifications are capable of attracting attention. And the sensors are leaking, and not through the seals, right along the pins. Can be sealed. But repairing the entire box is not cheap. In the most neglected cases, about 140,000 rubles will have to be left in the service. About 100,000 kilometers lives the suspension support of the rear cardan. In the original part is offered only assembled with the shaft and costs around 80,000 rubles. You can choose an alternative, 3,000, but in most cases, vibration should be expected with it. The Touareg has serious all-wheel drive. There is a symmetrical center differential, its force blocking and a lowering row. As additional equipment, a rear cross-axle differential lock was proposed. But even in this case, with such a wealthy mechanical part, the owners of the SUV cannot avoid considerable expenses. Less than 100,000 kilometers lives the center blocking motor. And after all, if he were dying, unlocking the node. But no, it dies at the post, leaving the differential of the part blocked. You can't ride with it. The same fate can befall the rear lock drive. For both, you will have to pay 100 to 120,000 rubles. In addition, not only with powerful ones, with all engines, the Razdatka chain can stretch over time. By the way, one more reason not to arrange traffic light races. The front gearbox is also aging without much reference to engine power. It's good that, unlike, say, the Cayenne, it usually does not fall apart, finishing off the body, it just buzzes with bearings. But to bring to a deplorable result is still not worth it. The new gearbox is estimated at 250,000 and it is great that it can be restored by selecting bearings, about 30,000 rubles. Suspension. Still, independent suspensions are not for off-road. Despite the fact that both the multi-link rear and the double-link front command respect for the size of the elements of their guide apparatus, off-road experiments with the Touareg can quickly ruin at least the hinges. In this case, ball joints are only offered together with levers. You can't press into the top Chinese aluminum supports. Fortunately, the original silent blocks are sold separately. If you move on asphalt, then you can hope that the suspension moves away at least 100,000 kilometers. Even with their struts, which were offered for a surcharge, they are protected, which is not always the case with manufacturers. And one more thing, the Touareg, unlike the platform Cayenne, does not have PDCC, Porsche Dynamic Chassis Control. That is, active stabilizers that can suppress rolls. There they knock and flow. And then, well, no, and good. Nevertheless, the air suspension must be carefully examined. Whether it lowers and raises, whether the compressor is constantly running, reporting that the pillows have lost their tightness. The latest from VW cost between 135 to 145,000 rubles. Refurbished cheaper, from third-party manufacturers can be bought for 20,000, but their quality raises questions. Electrician. Touareg of the first years of production was raw in electronics. For no apparent reason, the engine could stall or not develop power. The battery was discharged, door locks were wedged, in which contact was broken and the door sensors located inside them. The car was filled with new software more than once, but even at the end of the release, although much less often, the crossover could be weird with different blocks. For example, sometimes the headlight corrector motors fail and the xenon ignition blocks burn. After all, more from low-quality lamps. Over time, electrical problems can only get worse. For example, due to a clogged drain pipe in the area of the motor shield, water can enter the legs of the front passenger, that is, where some control units are located. The stove fan lives about 100,000 kilometers, non-original/original cost 15/30,000 rubles. So checking all electrics and electronics before buying is as mandatory as engine diagnostics, assessing the condition of the transmission and suspension.